They say the worst day can become your greatest turning point. So let me take you back to 1954 to a man named Chuck Colson, special counsel to President Nixon, once dubbed Nixon's hatchet man. Colson was one of the most powerful men in Washington, ruthless, brilliant, untouchable until he wasn't. Caught in the Watergate scandal, Colson went from the West Wing to a prison cell, a career in ruins, a public disgrace. But it was in that prison and the silence of shame that Chuck encountered a different kind of fire. Not one that burnt his career, but one that ignited his soul. There, behind bars, Carlson surrendered to Christ. And what came next? He went to found the largest prison ministry in the world, Prison Fellowship in 1976. One, yes, from the ashes changed everything. Why do I share this? Because that's Moses' story too. Raised in royalty, falling in disgrace, reborn in the wilderness, a bush that burnt but did not burn out, a past too heavy for men to forget, but not too broken for God to redeem. Because when God calls, He's not looking at your rap sheet, He's looking at your heart. Sounds a lot like Moses, doesn't it? Today's story is not just about a burning bush, it's about how divine purpose can rise from the ashes of failure, about how your worst mistake can become the altar where your destiny ignites. Hi there, it's Q3E2, and today we explore the topic the burning bush. You ready? Let's get into it.
Here are the key object lessons to be considered today. 1. God redeems even the disqualified. Moses the murderer becomes Moses the messenger. 2. Delayed obedience is dangerous. What nearly cost Moses his life was not ignorance, but neglect. 3. The presence of God demands reverence. The presence of God in a place makes it holy, and His presence demands reverence always. 4. One yes can shift history. Moses didn't know the full details until he took that first step of faith. Who knows what lies on the other side of your first step? 5. The power of a godly spouse. Zipporah, the shock absorber.
I'm guessing we are still exploring the story of Moses, right?
That's right. Moses lived 120 years. That's nearly a quarter century more than my dad has clocked in. And guess what? He still jokes about catching up with Moses, God willing. What makes Moses' life extraordinary is not just how long he lived, it is how he lived. His story unfolds like a three-act drama, each phase building towards something bigger. Act 1, years 1 to 40, born under a death decree, hidden in a basket, rescued by royalty, and raised as a prince in Pharaoh's palace. He was groomed to be Egypt's next ruler. Act 2, years 41 to 80. In a moment of fury, Moses kills an Egyptian from prince to fugitive. He flees to Midian, a new land, a new identity, a new family. Act 3, years 81 to 120. A burning bush, a divine assignment, a showdown with Pharaoh, and the deliverance of an entire nation by the hand of God. What a life.
Last week, we explored Act 1, his miraculous birth and palace upbringing. But this week, we journey into Act 2, the middle stretch, the season of self-doubt, of wandering, of waiting. And yet, buried in this quiet chapter is a truth we often overlook. Though Moses looked like a prince on the outside, on the inside he knew he was different. He knew who he really was. 12 short years with Amram and Jochebed, his real parents, was all it took. Before the palace and politics, they planted something in him that never died. Not even royalty could erase it. What a powerful reminder. The seeds sown in a child's early years can outlast kings, kingdoms, and crowns. Parents, never underestimate your assignment. And young people, don't despise the values you're learning now. They may one day anchor you in the middle of an empire. Because when your identity is rooted in God, even palaces can't make you forget who you are.
Moving on, one rash decision, one moment where emotions hijacked reason, and everything changes. Moses sees an Egyptian brutalizing a Hebrew slave. Fury boils over. He strikes, the man dies. And just like that, the prince becomes a fugitive. He flees from Pharaoh, from Egypt, from his destiny. Welcome to Midian, the land of second chances. Though on the run, something about Moses still radiated dignity, respect, order. Maybe it was the palace polish, or maybe, just maybe, it was divine favor. Either way, he soon finds himself connected to Jethro, the priest of Midian, and not long after he marries Jethro's daughter, Zipporah. Together, they raise two boys, Gershom and Eliezer, as we find in Exodus 18, verse 3 and 4. Some scholars even believe it was during this quiet chapter, while tending sheep in obscurity, that Moses wrote the books of Genesis and Job. Imagine that. Sacred scrolls flowing from the pen of a desert exile, a murderer, you might add.
Life slows down. It's peaceful, predictable, almost like maybe this is it. Until it wasn't. Moses is out doing what he does, guiding sheep across rugged terrain, when suddenly he sees it. A bush, on fire, but not burning. A flame that defies logic, nature, physics. He turns aside, drawn like a moth to the mystery, and as he draws near, God speaks. Right there, on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, he interrupts 40 years of silence with a fire that doesn't consume, and a voice that never forgets. What began as exile was about to become encounter. The Lord engages Moses in a conversation.
Let's take a moment to consider some takeaway lessons from this conversation thus far. We'll take turns. I'll start. Number one, reverence. In his curiosity to find out more, Moses approached this mysterious fire, but God calls out from within the fire with the first set of instructions. Take off your sandals, for where you stand is a holy ground. Now, hidden in this instruction is a principle and the rules of engagement. The presence of God demands reverence. We see this principle reiterated in words and or actions each time the patriarchs encountered God. It is painful to watch today how we have so trivialized the presence of God in the name of innovations in worship and the unbalanced grace preaching, especially when we assemble to worship. We gossip in sacred places. We scroll through social media during sermons, and somehow still expect the cloud of glory to descend. It doesn't work that way. The place of reverence as a prerequisite in approaching his presence is as true then as it is today. Remember this when next you assemble in his presence to worship and comport yourself appropriately. Some conversations in his presence should be embargoed.
Ecta's identity. Next, God goes on to introduce himself to Moses, and not just with any title. He goes, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Boom! Identity established. Moses knew exactly who that was. These weren't just names, they were promises. Each name carried a covenant, a mission, a destiny. It's like God was saying, Moses, you're standing on the shoulders of a promise that started long before you were born, and I'm calling you to continue it.
But Moses was a runaway, a murderer, a shepherd. Why him?
Exactly. That brings us to the third lesson, the nomination of an ex convict. There is a salient lesson of learning not to play God. Let God do God. The calling of God is not up to us to decide who qualifies and who does not. It is exclusively God's prerogative. In a moment of weakness, Moses may have allowed his emotions to overrule his sense of reason, both staining his resume and making a huge detour from the path that God had intended for him.
40 years later, having learned the lesson of patience, shepherding Jethro's flock, and dealing with those two little men, Gershon and Eleazar, God still sought him out, rerouted him back on track to his calling, marking the beginning of a beautiful relationship that is today a model for us. My guess, if it was up to humans to choose who gets to be a prophet, Moses might not have even made the usher team, and for good reasons. We do not read minds, only God does. And so, regardless of the growth of people in their walk with God, post the incidents of their fall, we are more inclined to still define people by their past mistakes and, in the process, deny people the opportunity to truly fulfill their calling. You know, maybe you've messed up. Maybe your resume is stained too. But if God still showed up in a burning bush for Moses, he'll find you too. He specializes in calling the disqualified and turning them into deliverers. Remember this.
Moving on, let's talk about the burning bush just a little bit more.
Wait. Back it up. Exodus 3:2 says, The angel of the Lord appeared to Moses in flames of fire, but just 2 verses later, verse 4 says, God called to him from the bush. Which is it, an angel or God?
And yes, you caught that. And no, it's not a contradiction. You see, in scripture, especially in the Old Testament, this angel of the Lord is not just some celestial delivery guy. He is the Lord. He's not just a messenger for God, he is God in disguise, often understood to be the pre incarnate Christ.
Wait, you mean Jesus? In the burning bush?
And that will be correct. Let's take a little trip down memory lane. In Genesis 22, when Abraham was being tested on Mount Moriah, at first in verse 11, the angel of the Lord calls out to him. But by verse 15, that angel says, By myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, I will greatly bless you. clearly, same voice, same person, God. Again in Genesis 31, Jacob hears from the angel of God in a dream. But just verses later, I am the God of Bethel, he says in verse 13. Clearly, not a messenger about God, not someone representing God. He is God.
Okay, so why call him an angel at all?
Good question. The word angel in Hebrew, malach, means messenger. It doesn't define nature, it defines function. So when you see angel of the Lord, the context will tell you if it's a created being, or if it's something far more divine. And there's more. Judges 2, Judges 6, Zechariah 3 all show this same pattern. A figure referred to as the angel of the Lord, yet speaking as the Lord, receiving worship and doing things only God can do.
So, in the fire, it wasn't just a sign, it was a person, Jesus, showing up in the flames.
Exactly. Before he ever walked the streets of Galilee, he stood in the flames of Horeb. He held Isaac's destiny on Moriah. He spoke to Jacob in the night, and he's still showing up in unexpected places today. Maybe not in a bush, but in your storm, your failure, your wilderness, doing what he does best, giving second chances and rerouting fallen men back on course with the Father.
So now we get to the big question. Why did God show up now? After 400 years of slavery, was he just now noticing?
That's the part that gets me every time. Exodus 2, verse 23 to 25 reads, Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the sons of Israel sighed because of the bondage, and they cried out, and their cry for help because of their bondage rose to God. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God saw the sons of Israel, and he took notice of them.
Wait, that sounds like he only just noticed, only just remembered. Really?
A cursory reading might suggest that, but there is more. Let's take it slow. First, takeaway lesson. God sees you, he hears you, and he is working on it. Hang in there. But if it takes 400 years to get his attention and response, that will be very concerning. Why did it take him this long to respond? Was he just noticing their predicament? I will be honest, I do not have all the answers either, but this moment, this very moment, was part of a plan, centuries in the making. You will recall, in Genesis 15:13, God already told Abraham, "Your descendants will be enslaved in a foreign land for 400 years, but afterward I will bring them out with great possessions." Considering that this conversation happened centuries even before Jacob, the progenitor of the sons of Israel, was conceived, makes it crystal clear God was not just noticing their predicament. He already knew centuries even before it happened and had a plan to rectify the situation even before they got there. This, like in many other cases, had more to do with the timing of God in the bigger scheme of things.
Brother Paul reiterates the same principle in Galatians 4, verse 4, and it reads, But when the set time had fully come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, referring to the timing of the coming of Jesus right on time. The reference to the fullness of time here makes even more sense when we juxtapose the 2,300-year prophecy with the exact timings of the birth, baptism, and crucifixion of Jesus. Everything happened at the exact time they were supposed to happen, revealed over 2,000 years prior. Taking it a step further, why 400 years of waiting to be delivered? Why not 40 or even 4 years? Short answer, we do not know. But we can deduce from the 2,000-year timeline prophecy in reference to the exact timings of Jesus' first advent that a series of events had to happen leading up to others. The sequence of events preceding that, which we anticipate, and the whys of their timings are only known to God, and it reveals to us as it deems fit. This principle is as true then as it is today. So, if it ever feels like he is late, just know he's not. Even before you got there, he already knew and has preferred a solution. When the time is right, he will not hold back. Remember this.
Next is Moses' role defined.
Wait, God calls Moses to go toe to toe with Pharaoh? After everything we know about Moses? Why him?
Yeah, that was exactly Moses' question. God says in Exodus 3:10, "Now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt." And Moses' response, "Who am I?"
Honestly, that's a fair question.
I I agree with you. Just take a look at his resume. Speech problem? Like me, he had a stutter. That could get in the way of presenting his case before Pharaoh. Murder case? Though this is a new administration, his murder case had not been adjudicated yet. We all know what happens in politics. If you are the opposition, your records are brought to the fore, to the open. So, what if, in confronting the new Pharaoh, they dig up his murder case? No bueno. Estranged from his people? To make things worse, he probably did not have the best reputation before his people, who were still back in Egypt. He may have been branded as having abandoned them in their time of dire need. Political liability? How do you even make this guy the face of a national liberation movement? It doesn't just make any sense. But that's the beauty of this moment. Because God was not looking for a resume, He was looking for a heart that had been humbled. And if Gershon and Eliezer are as active as my boys Kelechi and Kemu, humility is not an option. Bros, you go humble.
And after 40 years of palace pride and 40 more of wilderness washing as a husband, father, and shepherd, Moses was finally ready. Still, he didn't make it easy. He tried everything in the book to wriggle out. He goes, "Who am I?" Meaning, I am not qualified for this task. And he wasn't wrong. Exodus 3:11. He goes, "Who are you?" Meaning, show me an ID or something. I need credentials. Exodus 3:13. Last sorted, he goes, "Okay, let's say, hypothetically, I agree. What if they don't believe me? What do I do then? I need backup." Exodus 4:1. He goes, "Surely this role requires eloquence, and you know and I know I am not. Not now, not ever." Exodus 4:10. And finally he goes, "You know what? Please just send someone else, literally anyone else." Sound familiar?
Yeah, too familiar.
Maybe that's you today. Maybe you've been dodging your call, listing your flaws, citing your failures. But what if those flaws are exactly why he's calling you? Not in spite of your weakness, but because of it.
Then maybe it's time to stop saying, "Who am I?" and start trusting the one who says, "I will be with you."
Exactly my point. I couldn't have said it better. Well said.
So wait, before the burning bush, Moses was just gone? Like off the grid?
Totally. A fugitive separated from his people, exiled, forgotten. Think about it. Had Israel gained their independence without him, he probably would have just stayed back in Midian, lived out the rest of his life raising sheep, raising his boys, trying to outlive his failure. How many Moseses today are sitting out their own calling because they think they missed the window? Better still, how many would have been Moses' testimony are truncated today because feeling unqualified, we have not trusted God enough to take that first step of faith in response to the call on our lives?
So, what did God do? Just shut him down?
Not even close. God listened, and every excuse, every fear he addressed, each one exhaustively. He did not dismiss a single one. When Moses said, I cannot do this alone, God said, I know. So I'm sending Aaron with you as your wingman. He did not scold Moses for hesitating, he equipped him to move forward. He who God calls, he qualifies for service and enables. Remember that.
So, did Moses finally say yes?
He did. He didn't have a master plan. He didn't know how Pharaoh would react. But he trusted God, one step at a time. And that yes led to freedom, breaking a 400-year-old slavery, to the Red Sea parting, defying all known natural laws, to a friendship with God so deep God himself buried him. And even in death, God fought for his body.
That's unreal.
All because he said yes.
One of my sisters, Zara, would always say, never despise the days of little beginnings. At this point of his call, Moses did not fully understand the details of how things would play out, but he trusted God and he took a step of faith one day at a time. The result is what we read today and crave for thousands of years later, because every great story starts with one small step. Maybe it's time you trusted God and took that step of faith today. You're watching this, you've been waiting long enough. If God is calling, do not let fear or your past rob you of what God wants to do through you. Take that step of faith. God will walk the rest of the way with you. Begin now.
After the encounter with God on the mountain of God, out of courtesy, Moses returns to his father-in-law to seek his blessings to return back to Egypt. Jethro approves, and the journey back to Egypt begins, with Moses and his family full of purpose, calling, and divine clarity. But something interesting happens in Exodus 4:24. It reads, "The Lord met him and sought to put him to death. But everything was finally falling into place. The call was clear. The direction was set. Jethro gave his blessing. Why this sudden divine ambush?"
That's kind of confusing, right? Chapter 4 begins with a cordial conversation between God and Moses over a mission, and between Moses and Jethro handling some family protocols. And in the first 23 verses, everything seemed smooth and cordial. Moses even begins the journey with his family, leaving everything behind. Why then would God suddenly want to kill him? That's a really good question. First, if God really wanted him dead, he'll be stone dead. No drama. There is more to this. We see the same approach with Balaam and his talking donkey. In each case, God was confronting something both men had been avoiding, something God needed them to address urgently. We find clues in the next verse. The angel did not tell them what the problem was, but Zipporah immediately took a flint and circumcised her son on the spot to address the situation, not minding the pain and messiness. And the Lord relented in his anger.
Question is, how did she know what the problem was? Her swift action suggests they both knew exactly what the problem was. Might have even discussed it, but did not see the need for obedience on this issue, maybe citing civilization, separation from their people for the last 4 decades, discomfort to their son, or how too messy this ritual was. You will recall, while in Midian, inspired by God, Moses wrote the books of Genesis and Job. In Genesis, Moses, through inspiration, had carefully documented the experiences of the patriarchs in their walk with God. And in chapter 17 of Genesis was the institution of the covenant between God and the patriarch Abraham, to whom the promise was made, "Though your descendants will be enslaved for 400 years, yet the Lord will deliver them."
In verses 10 to 11 of the same chapter, God had very clearly revealed to Moses the conditions to participate in this Abrahamic covenant. The text literally reads, "This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me, you, and your descendants after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised, and it shall be the sign of the covenant between you and me." Bonus, he knew about it, he wrote about it, maybe even preached and taught in the Sabbath school about it, but he just never did it. And it almost cost him everything had Zipporah not stood in the gap and did the needful. Can you relate? Sometimes what's standing between us and our divine assignment is not lack of faith, it is delayed obedience in something we already know to do.
So, obedience is not optional?
Not at all, especially when God has marked you for something greater. You said yes to the call. But is there an unfinished obedience you've been ignoring? God doesn't call perfect people. Because let's face it, we're not. But He does require surrendered hearts.
Here are a few takeaways from this account as we run up for today. D, you go first.
We are not saved by obedience, but we cannot be saved without it. Martin Luther puts it this way: "We are saved by faith alone, but saving faith is not alone. Saving faith obeys. Because sin, it's not just what you do, it's what you fail to do. For it is written, 'He who knows what is right and does it not, to him it is sin.'" James 4:17.
So, even silence can be sin.
Yes, Casey, inaction, compromise, delay, It is the sin of knowing and stalling. Number two, it is great to know and even teach the word, but it is better when we live what we know and preach, especially if you are in leadership. Moses knew God. He wrote for God. He spoke for God, but almost died because he had not obeyed God at home. Do not skip the basics. Private obedience always precedes public power. Remember that.
What about Zipporah? She saved them both.
Yes, and we don't talk about her enough. She wasn't Jewish by blood, but she was godly by character. More Jewish in that regard than most Jews. She didn't just marry Moses. She stood in the gap for Moses. She saw what needed to be done and did it. Pain, blood, urgency, and all. Moses was able to fully focus and fulfill his calling because he had a capable and dependable spouse who took care of the home front, raising their sons. Some of us are where we are today because someone in our life, like Zipporah, was brave enough to act, to intercede, to obey. Never underestimate the ministry of a God-fearing spouse or friend. She didn't need a platform, a title, or a church office. She had purpose, and she delivered. She was Moses' shock absorber, helping Moses win their first mission field, their family.
So, here is your final nudge for today. Obedience is not always pretty, but it's always powerful, and sometimes your destiny is one unfinished obedience away. Even Moses had to learn that the hard way, and God used him to shake an empire. You are not a Christian if in name only, but in character. And that's a wrap, fam. This week's journey ends here. Please join us next week as we explore the rest of the story in episode 3, The Burning Bush. Until then, keep sharing this message. Let the world know Jesus is coming again, not eventually, but soon. I remain your Sabasco Doodle, doodling out. Let's make it make sense. One truth at a time.
Thanks for riding with us today, friends. If today's message moved you even just a little, hit that like, drop a comment, and share with someone who needs a wake-up call today. And hey, if you haven't yet made that life-altering decision to follow Christ, you still can. But don't wait. The clock is ticking, and grace is calling. I'll catch you next week, God willing. Until then, remember, we're still auditioning to take over in heaven. No retreat, no surrender.